You are listening to Shameless Stories, and I'm Nicola Humber, founder of the Unbound Press, soul-led publishing company for magical women writing world-changing books. And we are delighted to be the sponsor of this podcast. So enjoy, magical one.
Welcome to another episode of Shameless Stories, the podcast designed to lift the lid, unravel, get into the nitty-gritty of shame and what it means to live shamelessly. And obviously, to live shamelessly, you have to go through the shame piece. I'm really excited to introduce to you my next special guest, Katie Oman, who is, and I'm going to start, we'll talk about this, your long job title, who is an author, women's empowerment coach, book coach, event organizer, and everything else as well. Mum, carer. And there is no judgment, no shame attached to any of that.
No.
Though in the past, I suspect, because you're a bit like me, we have lots of ideas and lots of plates and lots of businesses and lots of all of the things like floating about, because I think we're just designed to just be creative. But I feel like it's an opportunity to shame people who do things like that. And, you know, I mean, I'm kind of leading the witness a bit here, I appreciate, but we were just talking about this.
We started recording it, so we kind of touched on this already. But yeah, I think it's a really, first of all, thank you for having me here. Awesome to be here with you on this podcast and to get into this. It's one of my actual favorite topics, and I talk about it a lot with my clients. Shame is something that comes up for a lot of people, especially women. So I'm really happy to get into this. But yes, I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur, and I know that I'm not alone in that space. And I think in today's world, I think it's actually good to be a multi-passionate entrepreneur, to be able to adapt and diversify. However, I have had people try to throw shame at me for that space. And what I'm so proud of, because we'll get into, I've had a lot of shame in my life, but we'll get into that in a bit. But I'm really proud that I instantly, my whole body reaction is always, no, don't give that to me. So I had a friend of mine, this was a while ago, and she was trying to help me. This is the thing, I knew that she wasn't coming from a malicious place, but she went, Kate, do you think you'd be better just picking one lane and niching down on it? And I instantly was like, no, absolutely not. I can't. That's the thing.
I can't let go of it.
I can't. I think I was saying to you, I've tried the proper job. I wasn't impressed. I was bored. My brain, I have too many interests, too many ideas. I also think when you are a business person, as I am and have been since 2018, if you have more than one lane, it means that you help different people who need you in different ways. And if you just pick one thing, I think that you're missing people, and you're missing all of who you are and all of the skills and the abilities that you have to bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to put it, because it's something, it's a challenge that I face, right? You've just described, and often the guests that come in is so I find this absolutely fascinating, that the universe sends people to not only enlighten me, but also the listeners. But you know, going through a similar situation, like it is, I've got so many ideas, so many things I want to do. And when I do focus on one thing, I get bored so easily. Like I started karate, like this is like a daft story, but I wanted to learn to do karate. I started back in November. I wanted something for me. And I dragged the children along, and they went to the first lesson, and they were like, yeah, no, thanks, mum, done. So I managed to drag the kids, a couple of them, a few more times, but I was loving it. I loved it until there was this one session where there was this big guy behind me who was like really sweaty, like really going for it with this woman behind me. And I'm stood in the line in the white belts with the kids practicing my kicks, which I was absolutely happy with. But because this guy was behind me who was like basically sparring, it just, my whole body just went, don't like that. And I thought, I'll try that again, and I'll go again. And I should also point out, up to this point, I had a female sensei.
Right.
So I felt really aligned, and she was very encouraging. She had a different style of teaching, unlike the male senseis in the group. And it was really evident. And the next time I went, she wasn't there. And it was like, I know I got to push through this. I know I have to persevere. I know I have to. But I got to a point where I was like, yeah, I'll go 2 more times. So I went 2 more times. And I was like, I don't want to go either now. And it's like, there was a part of me that really had to deal with the failure of not getting to my yellow belt, of not showing up consistently, of, you know, giving up because I was done. But I felt like I'd learned what I needed to learn.
3 things in what you've just said. And you know, and then your podcast, but I can't help it. When I coach. And
That's great.
Number 1, we don't start a story with saying this sounds silly or this sounds daft. Never apologize for your story, it's your experience. That's number 1. Number 2, we never say that we're a failure, because I don't believe in failure. I think it's all lessons and growth and development, right? I don't believe in it, full stop. The other word that I do not use with any of my clients is should. Because should is shame. Should is could with shame, right? And it's not your shame. It's shame that you have picked up from somebody else. So I should stay. I should be comfortable. I should not quit. Who says? Who says? Because if that's how you felt and that's what you were picking up on, how could you stay in that space? And let's be real, we live in a patriarchal society where it's not always safe to be a woman. And if you've got a man, even if he's a wonderful man, even if he's, you know, professional and he's trained and, you know, he's not dangerous, let's be real, he's a man. And I'm not being sexist when I say that. It's the reality of, and I always say this, yes, it's not all men, but we don't know which men. And to have a man who is, even if he's, you know, again, he's the sensei, he's the professional, to think about him coming at you in that way, I think triggers something that you can't control.
Yeah, 100%.
So there you go. I've coached you now. Okay, I'll see you next week.
No, but I mean, and this is great because this is an example of how easy that language slides into our vernacular every single day. And I'm trying to work really hard with this, right?
Absolutely. It's habit. We have habits with our language that we don't even realize. We don't realize that we're listening to ourselves all the time. And so we're just reaffirming that shame constantly. And, you know, as a parent, you suddenly got to be mindful of the language that you're using to your children, because you're just passing it down the generation.
Yeah, and I'm really crap at that as well. And you know, that is something that I'm really trying to work on.
Yeah. So like you say, I'm not great at it yet, but I'm
not great at it yet. I have my growth mindset thing on the wall.
Yes. Yes is a great word, because, you know, otherwise it's like, I can't do that. That's shame. I can't do it yet is growth. So
yes. Yeah. There you go, everyone. So Katie, tell me about your experiences with shame.
Oh, well, like I said, I know I can sit here and go, oh, it's this and this, and, you know, don't do this. And I haven't always been like this. This has been through my experiences and through learning, because if you'd spoken to me 10 years ago, I would be like, yeah, well, you know, and I'm sorry, and, you know, and I should be, you know, and I'd be doing all that. So it's come through my experiences, but I have been shown my own shame in many different ways over and over again, and it has been shown from quite a young age. I mean, I think the first place to start, really, the comfortable place to start perhaps, is, and we'll go into the uncomfortable in a bit, but the comfortable place to start is actually the career, because I've mentioned the fact that I'm self-employed and I'm you know, passionate and all that, but I haven't always been an entrepreneur. I haven't always been self-employed. Like I say, I had proper jobs, and one of them was that I left school at 16, not because I love learning, I love education. I'm currently doing a part-time degree in psychology with counselling, because I've got nothing else to do. But it wasn't that I couldn't or I didn't want to, it was that I was being bullied, and I went to an all-girls school for 4 years. So at that point at 16, I was just like, you know, once I'd done my GCSEs, I was like, I can leave now. And so I went and did a BTEC in childcare at college, because I had worked at a children's day nursery over the summer. And when the careers advisor said, what do you want to do? You know, as they do, which I think is such a stupid question to ask a 16-year-old, by the way. But anyway, I said, oh, I don't know. And she looked offended. She was like, what do you mean you don't know? I don't know. She's like, and you could tell that she almost had like a checklist that she wanted to get everybody somewhere. So she kind of went, well, you must have hobbies or interests or something, or have you had a part-time job? And I went, well, I've just spent the summer working at my mum's friend's day nursery. She went, childcare, you can do childcare. And before I knew it, I was out in the sunshine holding a brochure for college. Which, you know, if somebody said, yeah, well, you know, let's look at your educational record, let's look at what subjects you like, but she would say, well, and to be fair, I just went along with it because, again, I just wanted to get out. So, you know, it was what it was. But such was my desire for freedom after that very enclosed environment that for the first year, I went to the classes that I liked. And I did the coursework that I liked, which meant, and I thought I was getting away with it. Like, you know, you're 16, 17, you think that, you know, you're dead clever, right? So I go down the pub. Like, there was a pub down the road that didn't care how old we were, and we'd have half a lager and lime and play pool all afternoon. And I just thought I was
oh my God, you're describing my time at college. Like, we get to double word processing. I was like, no, let's go to the pub. Oh my God.
Well, I was so clever until my course lecturer rang my mum, and I didn't know until I got home, because she rang her and went, where's Kate? And my mum was like, at college. And she was like, no, she's not. She hasn't been for a while. And when I got home,
oh my God.
Yeah. And my mum was like, I don't care what grade you get. You're not leaving this course without some kind of grade. And you. So anyway, I had to do 2 years, a lot of work in 1 year, which was fun. But I don't. But yeah, when I didn't want to go to do that at university. I actually had a university place in Manchester to go and do childcare, and suddenly it was like last minute, I don't want to go. Then went and did performing arts at college for a year and a bit, because I've always loved performing arts, dancing, acting, all that stuff. And then got pregnant and dropped out. Then, which, you know, I'll get into that. But yeah, my relationship was not great. And so I moved back home. And actually, that surprise, I went to university with their help and got a degree in English and drama. And then did the PGCE. Tried to get a job teaching in colleges because my PGCE is imposed 16 and couldn't get one. And ended up working in a high school teaching secondary school English. And do you know what the shame is in all of that? I left after 15 months because I was on the verge of a mental breakdown. That's what doctor told me. And the shame, like literally sobbing to my mum, because I said, I feel like I've let everybody down. I feel like you have supported me while I've gone to university. You've helped me with my son. You've helped me financially. And I feel like it's been a complete waste of time when I've let you down. Right. And she said, Kate, nobody can take that qualification away from you. Nobody can change what you've done. That doesn't mean that you have to spend your life being miserable. God love my mum, and doing what you don't want to do. Go and figure out what it is that you want to do, but go and get a part-time job where you figure it out.
Yeah. And
God love her for that. Because I always think now, if I'd lived with other family members, they may not have been so supportive.
Sure.
Because teaching's a proper job.
Right, sure.
But it wasn't for me. Like literally, I should write a book about that one day, because like the things I experienced, I had a chair thrown at me. I had my laptop stolen. I had some boys who were about 15 came to me and literally threatened me and my son's life because I'd given them detention.
Oh,
I was a brand new teacher. Like, and then my deputy head was bullying me and undermining me, which, you know, cycles of whatever. But yeah, it was just like, I mean, talk about throwing at the deep end. It was horrendous. You know, teaching in my head was like Enid Blyton, you know.
Oh, yeah, I guess comparing it to being in a nursery environment where you've got little babies that are of element, you know, changing their nappies and playing games with them. It's a very different situation different. Going into kids that are of secondary school age who are pushing the boundaries.
Absolutely, because the majority of secondary school teaching is behavioural management and admin. You know, and it's jumping through hoops constantly, and you never get to the end of your to-do list. And it was just trying to be a single parent, even though I had my parents' help in that space. I was still and I didn't drive then, so I was constantly just travelling I lived in Rugby in Warwickshire, but I was teaching in like Nuneaton and Coventry. So I was just on the train constantly, back and forth and back and forth. It was a lot, you know.
Yeah, wow, that's like mad.
Yeah,
Like that you did that.
yeah.
And but you did that, right? So like reframing that, you did that, like you can imagine the amount of resilience you built out over that
Absolutely,
experience.
absolutely. I just found the shame element really interesting, and for a long time afterwards, I kind of felt like I still felt like I'd wasted my time. I was like, what was the point of that? Even before I had was spiritual, I was still like, well, what was the meaning behind that? What was the point of that? And I was still like, well, I've wasted all this time, and then realized, thank God, that there are transferable skills.
Sure.
And I have gone on, like I say, to run courses and workshops and motivational speaking. And I think if I hadn't kind of been thrown in the deep end of teaching and be able to stand up in front of a class of 30, 14-year-olds and kind of hold the room, that, I mean, talk about, you deal with that, you can deal with adults, no problem. It's easy.
Well, that's it, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
the thing that like we don't realize, because children have no filter, or teenagers, whatever, they're pushing the boundaries. They are still learning those social skills. And you know, I mean, it's just hats off to you for doing that, because you know they're
I know. I mean, people.
I
I
have
tell
too.
people, and they go. I used to teach in the high school. And they go, "Oh, you're brave." And I go, actually, the vast majority of teenagers are lovely. I had some great kids, students. There are obviously a few that are really chaotic and toxic, but that's the same in every generation, I think. Actually, it was the job itself that was the problem.
Yeah.
As opposed to the students. May I say most of them are okay?
I guess it's the rigidity that you have. I know that I've spoken to countless teachers that found it, you know, it's a hard place to actually be creative.
Absolutely. So a great example of that was I was teaching Shakespeare, which is always a bit of a challenge to teenagers because they're not interested, and you're trying to make it interesting, right? And so it was year 9, so they're like 14, 15, and we're doing Romeo and Juliet, which I think is one of the more accessible Shakespeare's, because they obviously there's so many adaptations, and the Leonardo DiCaprio movie in the 90s and all of that. So, but the thing about high schools is they give the kids the book, and you have to read through it, and people take it in turns to read it, and it's a play. You're not supposed to sit and read it. You're supposed to get up and do it, right? And so there was one afternoon, and I'm looking around the room as we're doing it, and everyone's either asleep or looking like glazed, like they've lost, right? And me being also performing arts, I was like, right, get up. And they're like, what? And I said, get up. And they were like, well, I said, just move all the tables and chairs to the side of the room. What we doing, miss? Just do it yourself. So they did. And I set up the room, and I did it like the Jerry Springer show. So we had the Montagues on one side and the Capulets on the other, with the Jerry Springer in an audience. And they learnt more in 40 minutes than they did in months. They got it. But my head of department walked past. I had a glass fronted classroom, and he walked past the room, and he literally, it was like a cartoon, he double taked like and then glared at me and walked off. And I knew in my stomach, I was like, oh, I'm going to be in trouble. And yeah, he called me into his office afterwards, and he was mad at me because it wasn't on the scheme of work. I hadn't done a lesson plan because I'd been spontaneous. And I was trying to go, yeah, but they understand the play now. He's like, it doesn't matter. It wasn't on your lesson plan. It wasn't on your scheme of work.
Right.
Which tells you everything, right? It wasn't about the students. It wasn't about, learning from a space, a personalized learning space. It was jump through the hoop, tick the box.
Yeah.
And as a creative person, I can't live in that rigid space. I just can't. I can't have someone telling me what to do. I need to do it my way.
But you also, like, what I would really love to take away from that experience is you had a room full of 30 kids who probably walked away thinking that Romeo and Juliet was the nuts.
Yeah.
What an amazing teacher who did this. We were bored to death today.
Yeah.
And like, they're the teachers that you remember. Like, you know, that they're the experiences in school that you remember, not the
Absolutely.
sitting there going, oh.
You know, now my twins are going to be 13 on the 15th of June, and they'll come home from school, and you're like, you try and be all like, how's your day? What have you done? They're like, oh, it's boring. Was your school's boring? Didn't do anything, it's boring. Like, I know most kids feel that way. So
yeah. But they haven't got a teacher like you, that's why.
Well, they keep getting Miss, Mum, you should come and teach in our school. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going back. You couldn't pay me enough money to go back to teaching. Nah, absolutely not.
So we talked about the comfortable shame.
Yeah, the uncomfortable shame, and it's a really interesting thing for me. I am somebody. I had therapy last year, and she said to me, I don't met anybody so self-aware. You said you're so aware, and I said absolutely. But it was a really interesting experience for me. So let me explain. So when as I say, I got pregnant when I was 20, and had my son just before my 21st birthday. Not planned. One of those things, life happens.
Yeah, sure.
And his dad was not the nicest of people, right? He was very controlling. He was very narcissistic. And for years, and that's one of the reasons that I left, because I could see that this was not a happy space and nothing was going to change. So we left when my son was 8 months old. And for years, I would tell people he was emotionally and mentally abusive, right? Which is true. And then I had my therapy last year, and just talking to her, it was the weirdest thing, because I really believe that when you go through trauma, your brain does what it needs to do to keep you as safe as possible. And sometimes that safety coping mechanism is dissociation, because your brain literally goes, it is safer for me to pull this and lock it away because it's too dangerous to have to deal with right now. And through therapy, I unlocked a box in me that I did not know I had pushed down so far. I had forgotten about it. And it was that it wasn't just mental and emotional abuse, it was physical abuse as well. Right. But I had disassociated from it completely. And the shame, when I remembered, not that it happened, but that I had done that to myself. I had not allowed myself to process and heal from it, that I shut it away. Now, I know through my therapy that, again, that's okay. I did it because it was a safety mechanism. It was a coping mechanism. It was what I had to do at the time. But I had to work through the shame of that first to get to that space.
Yeah, sure.
And I had to talk to my eldest son, because obviously it was his dad. And I owned my story, because one of my things, which Sarah, is that I say this all the time to women: when you own your story, you release the shame that was never yours to carry.
For sure.
But I still had to talk to my eldest son about it before I put it out there and say to him, look, this happened. And we had to have a really big conversation about it. And, he hasn't seen his dad for years anyway, but it was not an easy thing for me to kind of go, this happened to me, and it was awful. And yeah, it's a place now. I mean, I do my own event for women every autumn. It's happening in Norwich in October this year. And as part of that, I do a raffle to raise money for a local women's charity. And this year it's called the Pandora Project, which actually does help women and children to escape domestic violence and to recover and get them in a safer place afterwards. And I just feel so passionate about it, because I know, thank God I have my parents, because without them, I don't like to think about it too much, because I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah.
And so, it's not a comfortable thing to talk about, but it's also my story. And again, it's not my shame. So I try and keep talking about it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us, because, like you say, we need to share these things, because you won't be alone in that situation. And, the fact that you have this amazing event where you invite people to share their stories and give back to the charity that enables women to leave those stories is just, now I'm like, how can I do that? But it's like, no, it's just inspiring because, you know, to get through not only what the first kind of big story that you've shared is, you know, that's one thing, but this other piece where, you know, if you've only just uncovered it effectively, it's still relatively raw, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something I sit with every single day and, you know, sit kind of sobbing and crying, but it's the memories. It's really strange because when it became unlocked, as it were, and came back up again, it was almost like, the only way to describe it, it was like it had just happened. It was almost like I'd frozen in time, and I was having to process it like I was 20 years old again. And so the memories, and like I say, I had framed things in such a way that I was like, oh, that was an accident, or oh, he did that when he was asleep, because he used to lash out in his sleep as well. But I would frame it in a way that made it palatable to myself. I justified it. So now to remember the actual, it's like I've taken the glasses off, pull back the curtain, and I can see actually what did happen. I'm having to like, and the more I sit with it, the more the memories keep coming. So it's a constant. But I think the only way to kind of be in that space is to give yourself patience and grace, and go, look, healing is not, there's no time limit on healing. You know, but it drives me crazy when people go, oh, that happened years ago. Are you not over it by now? Go away, because healing is layered. It's so many layers, and there's so many different elements of it, and everyone's on their own journey with it. So I'm just trying to give myself grace in that space, you know.
But I think also, just to kind of lean into this a little bit more, is like, you've shared that experience with your son now.
Yeah.
If you had gone through this process a few years ago, he would not have been able to receive that.
No.
So I think timing is a massive factor. And I think that's what we, like you say, it's like, you're not going to be over it. Yes, you processed some of it, but you weren't ready to process it until now. And I think we don't give ourselves enough grace or credit with regards to our healing journey, because there's always going to be things that we're processing. I have it, I mean, we all do. I think, you know, I'll sit there and talk about something that happened in my 20s, like it was like last week, because these things come up to be shifted. And whether you're sharing it in a space like this, or you're sharing it with your loved ones, or you're writing it down, it's all healing. The more we bring it out of ourselves, the more distance we give that story, the less power it has over us.
Absolutely. Because shame is just secrecy, right? Shame exists in silence. And so, yes, you know, I think the danger is, what will people think? What will people say? And with that, I think that blocks people more than anything when it comes to shame. And yet my experience is, yes, there are people perhaps that will not hold space in a way that I would have liked them to, or they may not always say exactly the right thing in the right way. But I still have managed to release that secret shame and that, like, the burden of it off myself just by being vocal about it. And if people have a reaction to my words, it's like, well, that's their reaction, it's not mine. And it doesn't take away from the fact that my story is my story. And there's as a writer, I remember reading a quote that said, if people wanted you to write better about them, they should have been nicer to you.
Exactly. Well, there's that. And the fact that, you know, the more you share the story, the less shame result, you know, it sits in a dark corner until you face it effectively.
Yeah, but at the same time, the more that things become the monster under the bed, right? So the more that whatever you resist persists, and it grows in strength and power. So you think by pushing it into the corner and ignoring it, then you're safe and you're okay. But all you're actually doing inadvertently is giving it more power over you. So your shame and your secrecy becomes literally like this big monster under the bed. And yet it's still you. It's still a part of you and your story. And actually what it needs from you is your love and your healing. So you have to turn around and face it at some point, especially because hurt people hurt people. So what we don't want is that pain then transmutes and becomes this bitter, angry, violent thing where you end up lashing out on people who didn't even hurt you in the first place.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, so shame can be
100%.
so toxic. I mean, somebody who's going through the weight loss thing again at the moment, I say this to people all the time in group, and I say, you know, shame and guilt, I reckon, weigh like about at least a pound, if not £2 each.
I think that there is a relationship between weight and what you're carrying emotionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Look, it's protection, right? So you think, well, if I have that, because I can say this because I'm an emotional overeater, and I've been morbidly obese at one point, and I know that it's a form of protection, because if you're bigger, I think that there is that there's layers almost around you to protect the shame that you're carrying, even though the layers themselves just adds to the feeling of shame.
Yeah. 100%.
It's so complicated, and it's such a rabbit hole to dive into, because it's not, shame is fascinating as a topic because it's not just one thing, and it's so convoluted and complex, and it hides and it presents itself in many different ways, you know.
Yeah, 100%. And that, I mean, that's what I love about this work, because the stories that I'm getting to share with other people are so varied, but they're it's the same vibration. It's everyone's like, every single story that's been shared could have been me.
Yeah.
Could have been, oh, I've got, hang on.
We're not having
an incoming call
difficulties, right? We're not doing shame about that one today.
No, and this is real life, right? So, but I think it's one of those things that, I mean, I was always shamed for being the one that overshared, you know, because it's within me to set conversations in motion.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not always my conversation that needs to be shared. It's just, I just like to open doorways for people to be able to feel comfortable enough to share that story, or to speak into something that came up for them. And like we said at the very, very beginning, we all have shame, men, women. It's external. It's all about the external validation. It's always about what other people think about us, you know. And like you say, once people have heard the story, they don't carry it around with them going, oh, poor Katie, she did this. It's like, well, shit, that happened to you. I'm so sorry. But look at where you are now. Look at how you're dealing with it. And I mean, the fact that you're also an empowerment coach, you're working with this all the time, right? Your clients will be coming to you for this very reason. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the amount of stories I've heard in my coaching, and I coach people from Australia, UK, Ireland, I've done France, America, Canada, all over the place, but they all have pain and shame and trauma of different shades of crap. And it is holding space for someone to go there, to go into that pain, knowing that they're not going to be judged. You're not going to sit there and go, oh my God, no, oh my God. That's, you don't do that. You just hold the space for them with love, and you let them uncover it at a pace where they feel comfortable enough to do that. You know, because again, some people are ready to really just own it and like tell you everything. And some people you have to very gently pull the thread. Yeah. Because they come to you for a reason, but there is this level of like boundaries and safety and protection. So they want to talk to you, but there's also that resistance. So you have to just very gently, softly encourage, you know. But it absolutely, it's a universal human experience. We all pee, we all poo, we all dream, and we all carry shame. Yeah,
unfortunately. But that's the whole point of it, isn't it? We want to live without shame.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a happy place to be in.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the shame, the judgment. I was explaining, I saw a Pink do a grandmother. She was talking about a grandmother story, a Cherokee grandmother telling a daughter about the two wolves that we have inside of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the more you feed the fear, the anger, the hate, then that wolf will win over the compassion, love.
Yeah.
And this is like, by sharing these stories of shame, I don't want to feed the wolf of fear and anger and envy. I want to bring in the compassion, the love for another human. You know, hearing your story today you know, I'm honored that I'm honored every single time someone comes on here and shares their story, because I appreciate the wisdom that is found within those stories. You know, how someone else has behaved, reacted, responded.
Absolutely.
We respond in different ways, and we're always learning. So
yeah, absolutely. And I feel the same way, you know, when I do my women's event, and of course I've done 2 anthologies now, women's stories, and it's an honor to be able to. And again, I always feel like I'm being like man hating and man bashing, and I'm really not. I guess I'm feminist to the core, but there's something about women's stories in particular. I think because for generations they weren't allowed to be expressed, they weren't allowed to be acknowledged. You know, they're saying like if you ever read a poem or a story and you see anonymous at the bottom, that's a woman. But so it's almost like women's stories were like hidden. It was shameful. Women weren't supposed to have stories. And if they did, it was all like, oh, it was gossip and it was with their friends. They weren't supposed to own them. But women need each other's stories. That's how we rise up. That's how we get empowered. That's how we come together. You know, secrecy doesn't do us any favors. Shame will hide in those places, but it just keeps us separate. It keeps us disempowered. It keeps us squashed.
You know, you've got to remember, right? These men come from somewhere.
Well, yeah. Although you think sometimes that they just kind of appeared, right? One day. I swear, it's like they've forgotten that bit. They just like one day it was like, ping, oh, there's a man. Oh, look, oh, hello. You know?
Yes, so that is, that's another podcast altogether, right?
That's a very different podcast, yeah, which I can talk about for another hour. But yeah,
So how can people, if people want to come and work with you and be coached by you, how can they find you, my love?
Okay, my darling, thank you for that. Well, you can see my name here underneath my lovely picture. And that's how we spell it. The amount of people that say how to spell your name, I have to go, look, it's Oman like the country. I say Oman, it's Oman. I know, it's a thing. But yeah, it's katieoman.co.uk, and all of my offerings are on there. And I'm across every social media platform. I have the same name to make it as easy as possible, which is Katie Oman 1111. And if anybody wants to drop me a DM or a message or just whatever, I'm very open to talking to people.
Fantastic. I'll put all the details in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there any final words that you want to leave our listeners with?
I suppose the key thing I think for me is you are your longest relationship, right? Because even when you really love someone, life is meetings and partings, right? And so people leave, and that may either go their separate ways, or people pass on to the other side. The longest relationship you will have in your life is the one you have with yourself. Now, as somebody who spent a long time not liking the person she was, I can tell you that it does not lead to happiness, health, and well-being. You've spent a lifetime not liking yourself and carrying the shame and carrying this toxicity. You have a choice. You can decide to say, I don't want to do this anymore. It's toxic as hell. I want to choose differently. And that is learning how to be kinder to yourself. And but knowing, even in an instant gratification society, it's not going to happen overnight. But if you show up for yourself every day with love and compassion, you will move yourself into a better headspace.
Amazing. I'm going to take that and smoke it. God, where did that come from? Anyway, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for that amazing piece of wisdom. So yeah, as you know, you can find Katie in all the spaces, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Shameless Stories. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, everybody. Bye.